Welcome back to another segment of 11 Bravo. My name's Rick Seaman, and we're all about the combat veterans. I'm going to do a little book review here to start this one off. Vietnam, the country, the place, the war, the story. And if you've said the word Vietnam enough times, sooner or later you're going to ask the question, why Vietnam? Well, here's a book entitled just that, Why Vietnam? It looks a little for worse for wear here. I've had this book since the early 80s. It is written by Archimedes Patty. Mr. Patty was an OSS officer in Indochina during World War II. And he brings some very interesting facts to light here as to the situation in Indochina during World War II and immediately following World War II. Another great book you might want to take a look at is this one here written by Stanley Carno. It's called Vietnam, A History. Stanley Carno, a Pulitzer Prize winner. This is a great book. It covers the whole history of Vietnam going back centuries through the 20th century and through the Vietnam War. Also, I picked this up in Thailand back in the 80s. I was working on a show there, and you might be able to find it on the internet, find a source for getting this. It's called a Viet Cong memoir, written by Trong Nhu Tang, who is a high-ranking Viet Cong official during those days. So some good reading here if you want to, get up to speed on what Vietnam was about. And I know it certainly unraveled a lot of mysteries and a lot of questions that I had, regarding a war that I was actually involved in. Meanwhile, I have a very special guest today who I'd like to introduce, because you're speaking of Vietnam, you're speaking of stories, of legends, and I've got a legend with me here today. And I'd like to welcome Mr. Lynn Mattocks, who's a U.S. Marine Corps retired with 3 tours in Vietnam, dating back to 1964. Lynn, on behalf of Veterans Network, I'd like to say thank you for your service to your country, and most importantly, welcome home.
Thank you, Rick.
So, Lynn, you first stepped foot in Vietnam in 1964. What year did you actually join the U.S. Marine Corps?
Well, I actually enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1955.
In 1955, as you were enlisting, had you ever heard the word Vietnam?
No, because back then, I believe, in history, we called it French Indochina.
That's very true.
And so I didn't know what Vietnam was, where it was, or if it existed.
So you had no idea that, let's say 9 years from then, you were going to be walking in the door of that place?
Absolutely not. I didn't know that I'd see that. It was a beautiful country when I got there in '64. And the rubber plantations, I got to travel up and down around. I stood on the bridge at the DMZ with the North Vietnamese on one side and the South Vietnamese on the other.
Wow.
And even took a sampan right down the Qua Viet River, which runs along the DMZ.
Yeah,
that picture you have right there is...
There is a picture here. This is 1964, and Mike, can you bring us to that? Nice. There we are, 1964 on the
Qua Viet River.
Qua Viet River.
That's right, the northernmost river to the DMZ.
Right. So think about it. When Lynn Mattocks enlisted in the Marines in '55, a lot of us who were in Vietnam during the peak years, 68, 69, we were just in 3rd grade then when Lynn here decided to join the U.S. Marine Corps. For a lot of our viewers who aren't really savvy on military facts and terminology, in the Marines, you have some specially trained units that you were a part of. In the Army, we refer to them often as Special Forces, Green Berets, Rangers, and I say that because I'm familiar with the Army because I was in the Army.
I'm not going to hold that against you, Rick.
Oh, Okay. Thank you. Thank you. What do you call a Marine that is a special forces or specially trained soldier?
We call them Force Recon.
Force Recon.
Yeah, Force Recon, special training.
Okay.
They're parachute trained or scuba trained, demolition trained, and very highly motivated and physical.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes you get people from other MOSs or military occupational specialties like myself, and you get thrown in with those people because they need your expertise.
Right, right. Now, when you enlisted, you trained originally as what? What was your MOS?
It was an 0311 infantry.
0311
That was
infantry.
my first.
Compared to in the Army, we called it 11 Bravo. So, well, the 11's still there, so there must be some correlation.
Some correlation.
Right? Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and I will be back with Lynn Mattocks. Eleven Bravo, we are back with Mr. Lynn Mattocks. With you in the Marine Corps, the few, the proud, I always assumed Marine Corps training was a lot tougher. Am I correct?
I think it is. I spent time with the Army and going to schools and everything, and I believe that the Marines do work harder as far as physical and mental conditioning.
Right. I mean, because I remember '68 training for combat infantry at Fort Benning. It was tough. And Marine training. Now, do you feel Marine training was as tough in '55 when you went in as it was, let's say, during Vietnam, the peak years of Vietnam? Did it change? Did it get tougher?
I don't think it got tougher. I can relate back in the 50s, the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, which I was a member of. We did a 101-mile hike from Camp Pendleton to San Diego and back. And then a year later, the entire 5th Marine Regiment, we walked the entire perimeter of Camp Pendleton. That was 110 miles with full combat gear.
Wow.
And, you know, I weighed 125 pounds in, and I made it in good shape, so training must have been good.
Must have been good. Looks like it hasn't done you too bad even till today, right?
Well, I recall during Vietnam when I would see new troops coming in and even coming first into the combat zone, they were in shape, they were physical, they were ready to go. So I do believe that the training that the Marines have and continue to have to this day, and I'm still associated with the Marine Corps pretty close, is superior to the other branches of service.
Right. Now, how do you compare training in those years to Marine training today?
Well, I think basically it's the same. It's to be at the peak for combat operations, regardless of what your job is. You have to be at the peak. You've got to be both mentally and physically sound to the best of your ability.
Yeah. So we're talking tough.
Right?
We're talking tough. We're talking mentally tough. You know, that's what it takes. And you know, it's funny. You hear kids today coming home from school. Mom, my teacher was tough on me. Well, you know. That's funny because as I remember when I was in school and in those years, if you came home and told your mom or dad you got a butt whooping, well, guess what? That means you did something wrong. You're going to get another butt whooping now. So we always kept that part quiet. Yeah.
You didn't want two for one.
That's right, 2 for 1. But you know, you talk about combat training and combat toughness, combat experience, and how that generates mental toughness. You know, if I was a corporate CEO today, I think I'd have a recruiting agent for my corporation at these airports where you see these troops coming home from deployment today, walking through that airport. I'd have an agent passing out employment forms to those guys right then and there, to those men and women. Because you want mental toughness, I think that's where you're going to get it.
Oh, absolutely. You know, once you put a tour in combat, especially combat, you have grown and matured to a point that no other type of training or no other experience can bring that. Now, unfortunately, some of our folks coming back, they still have problems with that, and I can relate to that because I had problems after my third tour in Vietnam of getting back into the mainstream, and I'm just glad I stayed in the Marine Corps and worked it all out. Before I retired, and that made me a better person. Once I retired, I went right on in, and actually I retired the second time as a general manager of a corporation. So
I read a statistic just recently where a lot of soldiers that were volunteer Army during Vietnam actually re-enlisted after Vietnam and stayed in, which is kind of along the same lines as what you're talking about. And I guess you could say that might be fortunate for them that they did, because that worked out a lot of these anxieties and problems that are certainly equated with a guy coming right out of a hot combat zone.
Well, that's true. Actually, see, I spent every tour, all 3 tours of mine, I was not in the infantry. I was counterintelligence. I was 0211 counterintelligence. Yes. And I know for a fact that in the counterintelligence field in the Marine Corps, we had a very, very high rate of re-enlistment. Of course, you never get assigned to counterintelligence. You must apply for it, and you must meet a high criteria to even get to go to counterintelligence school. But even after combat, all my comrades, you know, they re-enlist and made a career out of it.
Yeah.
Most of them. I'm going to say probably 90%.
That's a very interesting point. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about Marine CI, which is counterintelligence. 11 Bravo, back in a second. Thanks for hanging with us. We're back, 11 Bravo, with Lynn Mattocks. So, Lynn, your first 3 years in the service in the Marine Corps took you from 55 through 58.
Right.
Your infantry MOS, what else was going on during those 3 years?
Well, the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines kind of became a test unit, so to speak. And they pulled me from the infantry. I went over and retrained in 106 recoilless rifles. And then along in 57, when they started all of the atomic tests at Camp Desert Rock, Nevada, I was selected to go over there and attend the radiological monitor school with the Army Chemical Corps there. And I became a radiological monitor team leader. So whenever they had the atomic test, I was responsible for the correct monitoring and all with my team, taking the troops as far into ground zero as possible and not expose them to excess radiation. We were in the trenches, it's a certain, I don't remember the distance back, but we were in the trenches during the blast. I went through 3 of those atomic tests over there, and then I was back to Camp Pendleton, and then went to NBC school and picked up a secondary MOS of 5711 nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare specialist.
Wow. You know, I remember seeing footage of those tests. I mean, we've all seen those shots of, you know, the guys in the trenches, and this thing just like blows right over them. I mean, were you there?
I was up in the front trench, and I'm going to tell you,
oh my goodness,
that's when the Parker factor gets 100%.
Wow. That must have been quite an experience.
It's as close to being in a combat situation without being in combat.
Oh, I guess. Yeah.
It's a planned thing, but it's dangerous. The blast, the heat, the radiation, the dirt, the dust, the sand.
Was it more than you guys expected?
Well, no, it wasn't more than I expected.
Really?
But it was more than I'd like to have had.
Yeah.
It's just too much at one time, you know.
Wow, I'm so glad to see you're still here. More along the way, 57, that was 57, and 58, what's going on 58?
Well, 58, I went into work one morning, and And they told me to pack my bags, and they were going to take me to El Toro. Got there, and I got on a plane. I disembarked at Cherry Point back on the East Coast, and went on down, and I hooked up with a battalion landing team from the 2nd Marine Division.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they were short on nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare spaces, so I was part of an NBC team, and the next thing I know, we're walking ashore in Lebanon.
In Lebanon, in 58.
Lebanon, yeah, and it was a peaceful landing with a lot of sunbathers out there and on
Really?
the beach, and we stayed about a day, went back aboard ship, and they sent me back home. I think I was gone 17 days or something like that.
What was going on in Lebanon that required a Marine landing?
It was a show of force there,
Yeah.
and we had some insurgencies going on, and
Stuff going on.
needed a show of force.
Show of force. There you were.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. Here's that same question again. Now it's 1958, 59, right? What have you heard about Vietnam by then?
I didn't know Vietnam.
Really? Still, it was just someplace, yeah.
I hadn't heard about it, really.
Right.
I didn't hear about it until 63 when I heard people saying they were getting shipped out,
Yeah,
and they couldn't talk about it because it was...
right. So most of your combat connections that you had with your fellow Marines were stories that came out of the Korean War.
Right.
Right.
When I joined the 5th Marines, almost all of our NCOs and all of our staff NCOs were Korean and World War II veterans.
Right, right. Okay, we're going to take a break, and a lot more to talk about here with Mr. Lynn Mattocks. It's just getting good, folks. Don't go away. Bravo, back with Lynn. So Lynn, here we go. Counterintelligence. It's coming your way. How in the world did you find your way into it, or did it find you?
Well, I think it really found me. I was assigned to Camp Pendleton 2nd Infantry Training Regiment as a troop leader, and I was also working as a hand-to-hand combat and self-defense instructor, water safety instructor, and physical fitness instructor. And one day, Colonel Morton called me down, and he talked to me a little bit, and he wanted to know if I would be interested in going to counterintelligence. And my first question was, what's that?
Yeah, what is it?
And he said, well, I think you'd fit the bill real good, and he said, I'll give you a good recommendation. So I went over it and everything, and I'm always ready to go forward. And so I said I'd do it. Next thing I know, I was in Fort Holabird, Maryland at the Army Intelligence Schools, becoming Marine Counterintelligence. So,
and what year was this?
it was 1963.
63. Okay. Now I got to ask you that same question. Now what'd you know about Vietnam at that point?
Actually, I think that's the first time I even heard Vietnam was back at Fort Holabird, Maryland at the intelligence school, because
Right.
not only did they teach counterintelligence back there, it's combat intelligence and it's the entire Army intelligence school.
Yeah, so counterintelligence. We know what the CIA is. It's a Central Intelligence Agency. We know that the CIA was involved in Vietnam. We know what reconnaissance is. That's going out, seeing things, gathering information, reporting back, creating intelligence. Am I correct so far? Okay. Now, counterintelligence. What are you really doing?
Well, we're looking at all aspects of intelligence and putting it together and collating it to get real hard intelligence. We specialize in human intelligence and recruiting, dispatching, retrieving, debriefing, and reporting what they report back to us as far as intelligence nature. And so we also are very, very involved in security and control of classified materials. So it's counterintelligence really is counter-espionage, counter-sabotage, and today we refer to it as counter-terrorism. The old days it's counter-subversion. We didn't want people to be subverted into the Communist Party. You know, that was our threat in the Cold War.
Right,
And,
right.
So
Very interesting conversation we're having here. So it's the area of counterintelligence is very broad. It's extremely broad. Probably broader than most people realize. You know, Lynn, we're having fun. And we've talked a bit here. And would you be able to come back maybe after lunch today?
Sure.
Do you have a little time?
Oh, I got a lot of time for this.
I'd like to do another round with you. Does that work?
They work for me.
Great. This has been 11 Bravo, and our next show, we will have Mr. Lynn Mattocks coming back with us, and we look forward to having you all there, because when we get back with Lynn, we're going to Vietnam. See you there. Rick Seaman, 11 Bravo. Thank you.